Hello and welcome to this portrait drawing course. In this course, I'll demonstrate drawing a portrait from start to finish. We'll touch on some light portraiture anatomy, work through starting with shapes and then moving into detail and shading, and making some fairly major corrections as well. While I hope that a drawing goes smoothly, especially one that I'm recording, sometimes they just don't go that way. In this course, I actually encountered two fairly major shifts and sets of corrections that needed to take place in order to create more of a likeness. I thought this would actually be a great learning process because drawings don't always go smoothly from start to finish. Sometimes we encounter errors and corrections that need to be made late in the drawing, when ideally we would have rather see them earlier, but that doesn't always happen. So what do you do when you find those errors? We work through them, we correct them, we make the necessary changes in order to push the drawing forward. I'm sure some of you will see the drawing errors fairly early on, but be patient, they do get resolved. So I hope you enjoy this journey of drawing a portrait from start to finish, using basic shapes, making measurements using the plumb line, making some fairly big corrections, and also working on shading and details. Let's get started. Hi, and welcome to this portrait course. I'm starting with some Canson cream drawing paper, which is just a nice texture. It's got a little bit of a tooth to it, a little bit of a grain, but it's not too smooth. I'm using a Blackwing Pearl pencil, which is one of the lighter ones that they have in this brand. Now for pencils, I would just recommend using what you're comfortable with, though ideally you don't want it to be too dark or too light. So somewhere around a B should be good. A really important part of a portrait is just to remember that the bone structure is how we recognize people. Think about if you were to see somebody across the street who you know quite well, you'd recognize them, of course, right? And if you're seeing them across the street, you're not seeing the exact shape of their eye or, the exact shape of their ear or their eye color or anything like that. You're seeing their bone structure, really. So throughout this course, I just want to remember again and again that the bone structure is what makes a portrait look real and look recognizable. That's what creates a likeness, not the details. Now there's a couple things that I want to be aware of early on in the portrait. One is the median line. So the median line is an imaginary line that goes through the center of the face. That's not through the center of the face as in this width divided in half, but it's like if you were to draw a line between your eyebrows, down the front of your nose, through the philtrum, through the center of the chin. And that median line is very important because it shows us the rotation of the head. So I'm measuring the distance from the bottom middle of the nose, the septum, to the bottom of the chin and marking it on the stick. Now I'm going to line up that mark with the bottom of the nose, and I see it reaches right between the eyebrows. So that's a pretty standard measurement there. From the bottom of the eyebrow, it's exactly at the hairline. So I'm fairly confident with that, and I think we'll change this eye in order to match that one. So we'll move the right eye up. So I'm going to do kind of a scan through or a pass through, sometimes using the plumb line if needed or measuring if needed, but basically just trying to refine the shape of the features, the face, even working into the ear a little bit, in order to kind of test where the shapes are placed, to test the distances, so I know whether I can really commit to them or if things need to move. Now, as you're drawing, take a moment and stand back and or use a mirror to see what the drawing looks like in reverse compared to the reference. When we've been working on the drawing for a while, it's easy to just kind of get used to how it looks. and not see it clearly anymore. The mirror can help just present a fresh view. All right, so we've got most of the shapes blocked in. I've shifted the neck over a few times here to make it a little bit wider and just to kind of connect with the corner of the mouth more accurately and position the head more accurately over the neck and shoulders. Now, the shapes are not super precise yet, but they're starting to take form. And more importantly, the measurements seem to be working out nicely. So again, I really encourage you just to take your time with this stage. There's no harm in really, staying here for quite a while until you're sure of the shapes and the placements and kind of ready to commit to the detail and to commit to the shading. Take a look at the eyelid here and just note how in this perspective, in this this position of the head, you can actually see the eyelid, see the underside of the eyelid as it wraps around the eye. So that's an area to pay attention to if you're drawing a portrait in a 3/4 view like this. It's just that little bit of eyelid and sometimes of the eye socket that you can see past the eyeball itself. That will help to kind of push the eyeball back into the head, so we're really working with the bone structure around it. At this point, I feel ready to start with the shading. The shapes are reasonably accurate, I think, and I've done enough measuring that there hopefully shouldn't be any major problems here. Now, I could make the shapes a little bit more precise before starting shading, but some of that precision will come with the shading, and I also don't want to become too reliant on outlines. So there are three kind of principles that I like to work with when shading or painting or really just sort of dealing with values. And drawing to some extent too. So one is large to small or general to specific. And that's true for an outline drawing. We started with the face shape and the hair and the shoulders and kind of gradually got smaller. We got more specific, really. So that's one of them. The other one is dark to light. So you'll notice I've started with the shadow mass here. I'm going to work towards the light mass. The other one is background to foreground, and that's more applicable to painting. But by background to foreground, what I mean is kind of working with whatever's further behind first and then building whatever's forward. So that could be as simple as working on this side of the face before you work on the nose and the mouth. It could be as simple as working on the crease here or working on the eyeball and then building around it. So here really I'm just continuing to build up the shading, keeping the value relationships in mind. So what I mean by that is making sure that the areas that are supposed to be darker are darker, the areas that are supposed to be lighter are lighter. So for instance, right here on the nostril, this value is very similar to that value, and it shouldn't be. So that means I need to make the nostril darker or lighten this area a little bit. Okay, now I'm actually going to come back to this eye and do a little bit more detail there. Now, my tendency here, and what I want to do is actually make the bedbug line darker, because that is an important distinction between the light and the shadow. And I think the reflected light could be darker as well. When I squint at the reference, the eyes are quite dark. And I just want to make sure that we get that value change, that value relationship, before making any big adjustments. All right, so the shading is mostly blocked in. There's still a few areas that I'd like to continue working on, but I want to just double check for the likeness here because I feel like it's starting to sway, starting to lose that likeness a little bit. All right, so here we are with a lot of shading done, a lot of drawing done, and it's not a likeness. So I've been sitting here plumb lining and measuring and trying to figure out where to shift things. And I really thought about redoing this and refilming it. But sometimes this happens. You know, sometimes it looks like it's going to be okay and you get more information on there and it's just not working. So I thought what I'll do is work through this and continue building a likeness, because this is going to happen to you probably. This will happen to me. This is sometimes just what happens in portraits. There's been a couple things that are bothering me. One has been the chin, which I think is too big because I think the lips need to move down because the space here looks a bit small. The other thing is that the head looks like it's tilted too far back. So what I've done is plumb lined from the top part of the hairline, so that topmost part, plumb line down. And I see that that topmost part connects basically with the edge of the nostril and almost the corner of the mouth. Now, when I do that here, look at how far over we are. So that needs to go all the way over to about here or so. So I'm going to do that first. So I'm starting here and then just lifting the forehead, shifting it over so her head is not as tilted. All right, I'm happier with where this is going. I'm going to do some measurements though, again, just to be very certain. So I want to measure where the mouth is and I want to measure the eye, and especially that distance between them, which I feel like it's creeping a little too close again. So she was tilted back quite a bit, and that was giving her more of a sloped forehead and kind of just a different shaped face, really. So again, it does always come back to that bone structure. And all of the measurements that I did at the beginning, still valuable, still helpful. But I think there needed to be a few more of them. And so that is, again, just that, you know, really good lesson to learn is don't rush that part. All right, I'm back after a break and taking another look at the drawing. I'm just doing some final adjustments before committing to the second version of the portrait. So I've been plumb lining very thoroughly, let's say, vertically across here, just making sure to get that tilt as best as possible. I can see the chin needs to be lengthened just a little bit, but I don't want to add too much more to the measurement of the overall height of the face. And I'm trying to get the shape of the eyes to be reasonably accurate, but again, not fussing with them too much, because if the bone structure is there, and I do feel fairly confident about the bone structure here, you know, the eyes blink, they change a little bit. Sometimes, you know, you wake up with puffier eyes. There's a lot of kind of little shifts that can happen in the eyes that are still very, very natural and very much, you know, this particular person. All right, so I'm going to come back to the eye now. This closer eye, and just start building up the detail and shading there. And then we'll take another look at the portrait. Just kind of notice any areas that might need to change, anything that's not quite accurate, and then really commit to it, assuming that it looks, you know, like we're ready to commit to it. I'm back now after several days break, and I've been looking at this portrait and, you know, not quite happy with the likeness. It's not as close as I would like it to be. So I thought I'd keep working on the portrait until the likeness is really there. and kind of walk you through the process that I'm going through. There are a few measurements that are really standing out to me. I'm continuing to use that measurement from the bottom of the nose to the bottom of the chin. The bottom of the nose to the bottom of the chin reaches the bottom of the right eyebrow. The next measurement from the bottom of the right eyebrow meets the hairline. So here I've got the measurement marked on the stick, bottom of the chin to bottom of the nose. Now it doesn't quite reach the bottom of the eyebrow. The eyebrow should be lifted a little bit. And if we go to that same place, we see that the forehead actually needs to be lifted quite a bit as well. I also noticed that one measurement, so if I go to that normal measurement that I'm taking from the chin to the nose, if I go to where the lips meet, one measurement lines up with the lash line of the right eye. It lines up at exactly that right spot, so I don't actually want to change that distance. As you can see, sometimes it's a straightforward process and sometimes there's a few twists and turns in the road. I think this is just such a wonderful example of how the attention to shading, bone structure, and then some surface forms can really push a portrait forward. After doing the revisions in moving the features around, it was just still looking flat. And a portrait should have some roundness, should have some lifelike qualities to it. I think this is just such a wonderful example of how the attention to shading, bone structure, and then some surface forms can really push a portrait forward. After doing the revisions in moving the features around, it was just still looking flat. And a portrait should have some roundness, should have some lifelike qualities to it. Thanks so much for taking this journey with me, and happy drawing. Visit NicoleSleethatelier.com to sign up for the full course or become a member to access all content.